The desert around Area 51 looked endless. Miles of dead earth stretched beneath a moonless sky. The wind carried sand across abandoned roads, whispering through rusted fences and broken warning signs. Simon Mercer had spent 10 years chasing conspiracy theories. Most people laughed at him. They called him obsessed, crazy, a man wasting his life hunting secrets that didn't exist. But Simon knew one thing. Governments lied. And somewhere beneath Area 51, hidden behind concrete walls and military checkpoints, something terrible was being kept from the world. Something alive. On a freezing October night, Simon sat inside his battered pickup truck, 2 miles from the restricted perimeter. His camera rested on the passenger seat. Night vision goggles hung around his neck. A small recorder blinked red. October 17th, he whispered into the microphone. 11:42 p.m. This is Simon Mercer. Tonight, I'm attempting to document unusual activity near Sector 12. The radio suddenly crackled. Static. Then silence. Simon frowned. The signal vanished completely. No stations. Nothing. Only a low humming noise. He looked up. A strange blue light glowed on the horizon. At first, he thought it was a military aircraft. Then the light rose vertically, straight upward, without sound, without wings, without any visible propulsion. Simon felt his stomach tighten. The object hovered thousands of feet above the desert. Then it stopped. Motionless. Completely still. No aircraft could do that. No helicopter. No drone. Nothing. His hands shook as he grabbed the camera. "Got you," he whispered. The lens zoomed in. The object wasn't blue anymore. Now it appeared black, darker than the sky itself. A floating void. A hole in reality. Simon felt cold sweat form on his forehead. Then the object vanished. Not flew away, not accelerated. Vanished. One frame it existed. The next frame it was gone. His camera screen flickered violently. The battery died instantly. The truck engine stalled. The headlights shut off. Everything around him became dark. The desert fell silent. No wind. No insects. Nothing. Simon suddenly realized he couldn't hear his own breathing. A deep pressure filled the air, like invisible hands squeezing his skull. Then he saw them. Figures standing outside the truck. At least 20. Thin. Perfectly still. They surrounded him from every direction. Simon's pulse exploded. The figures were nearly 8 feet tall. Their arms hung unnaturally low. Their heads were elongated. No faces. Only smooth, pale skin reflecting moonlight. He froze. One of them moved. Its head tilted sideways. Slowly. Almost curiously, like it was studying him. Simon slammed the ignition. Nothing happened. The truck remained dead. The creature stepped closer. Its body bent strangely, like its bones weren't made for Earth's gravity. Then Simon noticed something horrifying. Its legs bent backward, not forward, backward, like an insect. A sudden wave of nausea hit him. The creature stopped inches from his window. Simon couldn't breathe. Its blank face pressed against the glass. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. It was looking directly at him. A sharp pain exploded inside Simon's head. He screamed. Images flooded his mind. Thousands of them. Cities burning, people running, dark ships descending from red clouds, mountains covered with human bones, a gigantic black structure floating above Earth, and beneath it, something sleeping, something ancient, something impossible. Simon gasped. The images vanished. The creature stepped back. The other figures followed. Then every one of them turned toward the desert, as if hearing a distant command. A second later they disappeared into darkness. Gone. The pressure lifted. The wind returned. The truck engine suddenly roared back to life. Simon sat frozen behind the wheel, his entire body trembling. He checked the clock. 11:43 p.m. Only 1 minute had passed, but it felt like hours. He looked toward the desert. The creatures were gone, yet something remained. Footprints, huge footprints, leading toward a section of Area 51 that wasn't marked on any map. A forgotten region, known among local workers as the Dead Sector. The next morning, Simon visited a nearby town called Rachel. Most locals avoided discussing Area 51. But an elderly man sitting outside a diner agreed to speak. His name was Walter Briggs, a retired security officer. 80 years old, blind in one eye. Walter listened silently as Simon described the encounter. The old man's face turned pale. "Leave," Walter whispered. "What?" "Leave Nevada." Simon laughed nervously. "You know something." Walter stared into the distance. "I worked there." Simon leaned forward. The old man's hands trembled. "There are places underground nobody is allowed to enter." "What kind of places?" Walter swallowed. "Hangars. What do they keep inside?" Walter looked directly at Simon, his remaining eye filled with terror. "Not what?" Silence. "Who?" A cold chill ran through Simon's body. 40 years ago, they found something buried beneath the desert. "What?" It wasn't a spacecraft. Simon's heart pounded. "What was it?" Walter's voice dropped to a whisper. "A prison." The diner suddenly fell silent. Every conversation stopped. Every customer turned toward them. All at once, without warning, without expression. Walter's face turned white. "Oh, God." The customers stood up simultaneously. Chairs scraped across the floor. One by one they faced Simon. Their eyes looked wrong, empty, like puppets. Walter grabbed Simon's arm. "We need to go." They rushed outside. The customers followed, walking slowly, mechanically, 20 people moving together, without speaking, without blinking. Walter dragged Simon into his truck. "Drive." Simon slammed the accelerator. The vehicle shot onto the highway. The people remained standing outside the diner, watching, motionless, like statues. Miles later, Walter finally spoke. "They know about you now. Who knows?" Walter stared through the windshield. "The ones underground." Simon felt ice spreading through his veins. "What are they?" Walter didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened an old metal box. Inside was a faded photograph. The picture showed a massive underground hangar. Military personnel stood in rows. Behind them towered a gigantic metal door, at least 50 feet high, covered in strange symbols. Simon examined the image carefully. Then his blood froze. Standing beside the door was one of the creatures he had seen the previous night. The same pale skin, the same elongated head, the same impossible body. Walter pointed toward the date stamped on the photograph. October 17th, exactly 58 years earlier. Simon's hands began shaking. "That's impossible." Walter nodded slowly. "It gets worse." Written on the back were 4 words. "Do not open Hangar 18. Simon's heart skipped a beat. "What's inside?" Walter's face drained of color. "The first one." "The first what?" Walter looked genuinely terrified. "The first alien that ever came to Earth." The truck radio suddenly activated by itself. Static filled the cabin. A distorted voice emerged. Deep, wet, inhuman, and speaking perfect English. Walter slammed on the brakes. Both men stared at the radio. The voice returned. "We remember you." The transmission ended. Silence. Then every electronic device inside the truck shut down. The engine died. The desert became still. Walter slowly turned toward the rear window. His eyes widened in horror. Simon followed his gaze. Far behind them, standing in the middle of the highway, was a single pale figure, watching them, waiting, and somehow it was smiling. A terrifying alien horror story. Part 2 of 6. The pale figure stood motionless in the middle of the highway. Miles of empty desert surrounded it. No cars, no lights, no sound. Only that thing, watching, waiting, smiling. Simon stared through the rear window, unable to move. Its face was no longer smooth. A mouth had appeared, a wide, unnatural grin, stretching almost from one side of its head to the other. The smile looked wrong, like something that had learned how humans smiled by watching them from far away. Walter's breathing became frantic. "We have to leave. The truck won't start. Don't look at it." Simon couldn't take his eyes away. The creature raised one long arm, then pointed directly at him. A sharp pain exploded inside Simon's skull. The highway vanished. The desert disappeared. Suddenly, Simon was somewhere else, somewhere impossible. A gigantic underground chamber stretched endlessly beneath him. Rows of metal pods filled the darkness, thousands of them. Each pod contained a human being, men, women, children, floating motionless inside glowing blue liquid. Their eyes were open, their mouths silently screaming. Simon tried to move, couldn't. Then he noticed something standing among the pods. A massive shadow, at least 20 feet tall. Its body resembled the pale creature's, but far larger, far older. Its skin looked black instead of white. Its eyes glowed like burning stars. The giant being slowly turned toward him, and smiled. Vision shattered. He found himself back inside the truck. Blood poured from his nose. Walter looked horrified. "It touched your mind. What was that place?" Walter didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket and removed a small silver cross. His hands trembled violently. "I prayed I'd never see this again." Suddenly, the truck engine roared back to life. The headlights flashed on. The figure behind them vanished, gone, as though it had never existed. Walter immediately accelerated. Neither man spoke for nearly an hour. Finally, they reached Walter's isolated cabin deep in the Nevada desert. The old man locked every door, covered every window, then led Simon into a hidden basement. The room looked like a war bunker. Maps covered the walls, government documents filled filing cabinets. Newspaper clippings stretched across huge boards, connected by red strings. And at the center of everything stood one photograph. A photograph of Hangar 18. Simon stepped closer. The image showed the enormous metal door Walter had shown him earlier. But now he noticed something disturbing. The strange symbols covering the door weren't random. They formed a message, a warning. Walter handed him a translated document. Simon read the words and felt his blood run cold. "Do not wake the first visitor." "What does that mean?" Simon asked. Walter sat heavily in a chair. For decades, the government told people Area 51 was used to study alien technology. And that wasn't true. Simon waited. Walter looked exhausted. The technology wasn't what frightened them. Then what did? The pilot. A heavy silence filled the room. Walter continued. "In 1947, something crashed near Roswell." Simon nodded. Everyone knew that story. But Walter shook his head. "The public version is a lie." "What really happened?" Walter swallowed. "The craft wasn't destroyed." Simon frowned. "What?" "It landed." The room suddenly felt colder. Walter opened an old military folder. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Black and white images taken underground. Scientists, soldiers, medical teams, and among them, a pale humanoid creature. Alive. Standing upright. Looking directly at the camera. Simon nearly dropped the photograph. "That's impossible." Walter nodded grimly. "The government captured it." "What happened?" Walter stared at the floor. "It asked for help." Simon blinked. "Help?" "It told them something was coming." The silence became unbearable. What was coming? Walter's voice shook. The others. A loud crash echoed upstairs. Both men jumped. Another crash followed, then another. Something was hitting the cabin walls. Walter grabbed a shotgun. "Stay here." The old man climbed the basement stairs. Simon waited. Seconds passed, then minutes. Nothing. No gunshots, no voices. Only silence. An awful silence. Finally Simon followed. The cabin above looked empty. The front door hung open. Cold desert winds swept through the room. Walter was gone. His shotgun lay on the floor. Beside it was a trail. Not blood. Something black. Thick. Sticky. Like oil. Simon followed it outside. The trail led into darkness. Across the desert. Toward a distant mountain range. Toward Area 51. And beside the trail were footprints. Hundreds of them. Long, thin, inhuman. As though an entire army of creatures had crossed the desert during the night. Watching him. Leading him somewhere. Leading him to Hangar 18. 3 days later, Simon stood near the restricted military perimeter. Walter had vanished. The authorities claimed no record of him existed. His cabin had disappeared. The bunker was gone. Every document Simon had seen was missing. It was as if Walter had never lived. Yet Simon still had one thing. A small flash drive hidden inside his jacket. Walter had secretly slipped it into his pocket before disappearing. Simon connected it to his laptop inside a motel room. The drive contained a single video file. No title, no date, just a black screen. Simon pressed play. Static appeared, then an underground hangar. Scientists moved nervously around cameras. Military guards aimed rifles. A giant metal door stood before them. The number painted above it read 18. The recording timestamp showed October 17, 1968. The same date from the photograph. A voice spoke through the camera. "This is the first opening attempt." Sirens echoed. Massive locks disengaged. One by one, the giant door slowly opened. Darkness waited beyond. At first nothing happened. Then something moved inside. A shape. Tall. Thin. Impossible. The guards immediately opened fire. The footage became chaotic. People screamed. Lights exploded. The camera fell sideways. For several seconds only darkness remained. Then a figure stepped into view. Simon froze. The creature was enormous, at least 15 feet tall. Its skin looked blacker than coal. Its eyes glowed white. And across its face stretched that same horrible smile. The camera operator screamed. The creature leaned toward the lens, then spoke. Not in an alien language, not through technology, directly, clearly, perfect English. Its voice sounded ancient, older than humanity itself, older than civilization, older than Earth. It said, "You opened the door." The screen filled with static. Then the video ended. Simon sat frozen, unable to breathe, unable to think. Then his laptop screen changed by itself. Words slowly appeared. Typed one letter at a time. No keyboard, no user, just invisible hands. The message read, "We have been here longer than your son." More letters appeared. "Come to Hangar 18. Another line. We are waiting." Then the screen went black. At that exact moment the motel lights shut off. Every bulb, every television, every electronic device, dead. Simon looked out the window. The parking lot was empty, except for one thing. Standing beneath a flickering street lamp, a pale figure, smiling. It wasn't alone. Dozens more stood behind it, perfectly still, facing Simon's room, as if an entire alien colony had finally found him. End of Part 2. H2. A terrifying alien horror story, H2. H3 of 6. H3. The motel room was completely dark. Simon stood frozen beside the window. Outside, dozens of pale figures stared up at him. None of them moved. None of them blinked. They simply stood beneath the flickering streetlights, watching, waiting. The air inside the room suddenly felt heavy, like invisible water filling every corner. Simon backed away from the glass. His heart hammered violently. Then every figure outside tilted its head at exactly the same moment. The motion was perfectly synchronized, not a second apart, not even a fraction. As if they all shared the same mind. A low humming sound filled the room. The walls began vibrating. The mirror above the sink cracked. Tiny fractures spread across the glass. Then a voice whispered inside Simon's head. Not through his ears, inside his mind. "Come home." Simon screamed. The motel lights instantly returned. The humming vanished. Outside, the parking lot was empty. Every figure was gone. Only darkness remained. By sunrise, Simon had made his decision. He was going to Area 51, not because he wanted answers, because whatever was hunting him would never stop. The only way forward was through the nightmare. 3 hours later, he drove deep into the Nevada desert. The farther he traveled, the stranger things became. His GPS malfunctioned. Road signs appeared where none should exist. Entire stretches of highway vanished from his maps. At one point, he passed the same abandoned gas station 3 times, even though he never turned around. Reality itself seemed wrong near Area 51, like the desert was bending, changing, watching him. As evening approached, Simon arrived at a mountain ridge overlooking a restricted valley. His breath caught. Below him stood something he had never seen on any satellite image. A massive facility hidden beneath the desert. Concrete structures, military checkpoints, radar towers, and at the center, a gigantic circular opening descending into darkness. Like a bottomless well. A secret entrance. A doorway into the underground world beneath Area 51. The underground prison. Night fell. Simon waited until midnight before moving. Using night vision goggles, he slipped past fences and patrol routes. The entire facility felt abandoned. No guards, no vehicles, no activity. Only silence. An unnatural silence. Eventually he reached the giant opening. A freight elevator descended into darkness. The controls were still active. Someone wanted him to enter. That realization terrified him more than anything else. Slowly, Simon stepped onto the platform. The elevator began descending. Down, down, down. Minutes passed. The desert disappeared far above. Darkness swallowed everything. The walls around him changed from concrete to smooth black stone. Ancient stone. Far older than the military base. Far older than America. Older than recorded history. Finally, the elevator stopped. A massive corridor stretched ahead. Its walls were covered with strange symbols. The same symbols from Hangar 18. The same warning. Do not wake the first visitor. Simon walked forward. His flashlight illuminated rows of gigantic doors, each one numbered. Hangar 18. The legendary door stood before him, even larger in person. The metal surface looked ancient, despite its impossible construction. No rust, no damage, as though it had existed for millions of years. Then Simon noticed something horrifying. The door was already open, just slightly. A narrow gap revealed darkness beyond. Something had opened it recently. Something had come out. A sudden scream echoed through the corridor. Human. Terrified. Simon followed the sound. The hallway led to an enormous chamber. Rows of computer terminals lined the walls. Military equipment lay scattered everywhere. The room looked abandoned during an evacuation. Then Simon saw the bodies. Dozens of them. Scientists, soldiers, engineers. Every corpse was perfectly preserved. Not a drop of blood anywhere. No wounds, no signs of violence. Just expressions of pure terror frozen on their faces, as though they had died after witnessing something unimaginable. A nearby computer screen flickered to life. Words appeared. Accessing archive. Video file found. Simon clicked play. A security recording appeared. The date was recent. Only 2 weeks old. The footage showed a team of armed soldiers entering Hangar 18. The men looked nervous. One carried a flamethrower. Another held advanced scanning equipment. The giant door slowly opened. Darkness waited inside. Then a voice emerged, not from the soldiers, from within the hangar. A deep voice, ancient, patient, hungry. "Are you ready to see the truth?" The soldiers froze. One man screamed. Another dropped his weapon. The camera feed suddenly distorted. Static covered the screen. When the image returned, every soldier was gone. The corridor stood empty. Only one thing remained. A black shadow standing in the doorway, watching the camera, watching Simon. The recording abruptly ended. A loud metallic sound echoed somewhere nearby. Clang. Simon spun around. Silence. Then another. Clang. Closer. Something was moving through the facility. Something large. Something heavy. Simon shut off his flashlight. The corridor outside had become completely dark. Yet he could hear footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Approaching. Clang. 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 Each step shook the floor. Simon hid behind a row of computer terminals. The footsteps stopped outside the chamber. For several seconds nothing happened. Then a shadow appeared in the doorway. A gigantic shadow, far taller than any human. Simon carefully peeked around the terminal. His blood turned to ice. The creature from the Hangar 18 footage stood only 20 feet away, 15 feet tall, black skin, glowing eyes, the impossible smile. The first visitor. It slowly scanned the room, looking for him. Then its eyes locked onto Simon's hiding place. The creature smiled wider, much wider. Its jaw split open impossibly far. Teeth unfolded from inside its mouth. Thousands of them. Like a shark. Like an insect. Like something not meant to exist. Simon nearly screamed. But before the creature could move, a siren suddenly erupted throughout the facility. Red emergency lights flashed everywhere. The creature looked upward. For the first time, Simon saw fear in its eyes. Fear. The monster was afraid of something. A voice boomed through hidden speakers. Containment failure detected. The announcement repeated. Again. And again. Then another message followed. One sentence. A sentence that made Simon's blood run cold. All personnel evacuate immediately. The first visitor stepped backward. Its smile vanished. The creature turned toward Hangar 18, as though something inside was calling to it. Something even worse. Something even older. Then Simon heard it. A sound rising from deep within the hangar. A sound that no human throat could produce. A colossal roar. The entire facility trembled. Lights exploded overhead. Doors buckled. Concrete cracked. And from somewhere inside the darkness beyond Hangar 18, something gigantic awakened. End of Part 3. H2, a terrifying alien horror story. H3, Part 4 of 6. H3. The roar shook the entire underground complex. Simon fell to his knees. The floor cracked beneath him. Dust poured from the ceiling. Every alarm in the facility screamed at once. Red emergency lights flashed violently across the corridor. The first visitor stood motionless before Hangar 18. For the first time since Simon had seen it, the creature appeared terrified. Its glowing eyes stared into the darkness beyond the massive doorway. Something was coming. Something that even the first visitor feared. The roar came again. Louder, deeper. It sounded less like an animal and more like an entire mountain screaming. The air itself vibrated. Simon pressed his hands against his ears. Blood trickled from his nose. Then the impossible happened. Every symbol carved into the walls began glowing. Thousands of ancient markings illuminated the corridor. The strange language spread across every surface like burning veins. A hidden message emerged, one repeated over and over. Keep it asleep. Keep it asleep. Keep it asleep. Keep it asleep. A terrible realization struck Simon. Hangar 18 wasn't a prison for the first visitor. The first visitor had been a guard. Something else was imprisoned deeper inside. Something far worse. The first visitor suddenly turned toward Simon. Its expression was no longer mocking, no longer amused. Now it looked desperate. The giant being stepped closer. Simon backed away. The creature raised one enormous hand. A wave of pressure struck Simon's mind. Instantly the world vanished. He found himself standing beneath an alien sky. Moons hung overhead. Black oceans stretched to the horizon. Towering structures covered the landscape. Cities larger than continents. Machines beyond human understanding. Billions of pale beings walked among them, the same species as the first visitor. This was their world, their home. Then Simon saw the darkness. A massive shadow appeared above the planet. At first it resembled a cloud. Then he realized it was alive. The thing was larger than a continent, larger than mountains. Its body shifted constantly, changing shape, growing, twisting. Reality itself warped around it. The alien civilization panicked. Ships launched into space, weapons fired, entire armies mobilized. Nothing worked. The darkness consumed everything. Cities vanished, oceans evaporated, continents cracked apart, billions died. Then the vision changed. Simon saw thousands of alien ships fleeing through space. One of them carried a special cargo, a prison containing the ancient darkness. The surviving aliens searched the universe for somewhere to hide it, somewhere remote, somewhere young. Eventually they found Earth, millions of years before humans existed, and there, beneath what would one day become Nevada, they buried it. The vision ended. Simon collapsed onto the floor, gasping. The first visitor stood above him. For a moment, neither moved. Then the creature spoke, not inside his mind, out loud. Its voice sounded ancient, broken, like stone grinding together. We failed. Simon stared. The monster continued. It wakes. Then the facility shook violently. The first visitor looked toward Hangar 18. Fear returned to its face. And then it ran. The gigantic being fled into the darkness, running from whatever was awakening below. The emergency lights suddenly died. Total darkness swallowed the corridor. Simon switched on his flashlight. Its beam shook in his trembling hands. Something moved ahead. A shape. Enormous. The corridor itself seemed too small to contain it. The thing moved slowly, dragging itself through the darkness. Simon froze. The flashlight flickered. For one brief second the beam illuminated a massive eye, an eye larger than a car. Then the light failed. Darkness returned. The thing continued moving. Closer, closer, closer. Simon turned and ran. The underground prison had become chaos. Doors slammed open. Sirens blared. Emergency systems failed. Simon sprinted through corridors as tremors rocked the facility. Behind him came strange sounds. Not footsteps, not breathing. Whispers, thousands of whispers, millions, all speaking simultaneously. The voices came from every direction, every wall, every shadow, every inch of darkness. Simon, Simon, Simon. His name echoed endlessly. The thing knew him. It had always known him. That realization nearly broke his mind. Eventually, Simon reached a sealed security room. The heavy blast door still functioned. He rushed inside and slammed it shut. Massive locks engaged. For the first time in hours, he felt safe. Then he noticed the monitor wall. Dozens of surveillance fiends still worked. Every camera in the facility displayed static. Except one. Camera 01, the deepest camera, the lowest level, the oldest section of the prison. Simon stared at the screen. A gigantic chamber appeared, miles wide, ancient beyond imagination. At the center stood a colossal structure. Chains thicker than skyscrapers stretched across the darkness. The chains connected to something hidden below. Something so large the camera couldn't capture it. Then one chain snapped. The sound echoed through the speakers. A second chain broke. Then a third. The chamber trembled. Something beneath the darkness was moving, slowly, awakening after millions of years. Simon watched in horror as a shape began rising. Not fully, only partially. Yet even that tiny glimpse shattered his understanding of reality. The thing was impossible. No creature should be that large. No life form should exist on that scale. The camera feed distorted, the image blurred. The system itself seemed incapable of recording it. Then a face appeared, only part of a face, a fragment, an eye, a mouth, something resembling both and neither. Simon felt immediate pain inside his head. Blood poured from his ears. Human brains were never meant to look at such a thing. The monitor exploded. The room went dark. A deep voice filled the security room. Not from speakers, from everywhere. The walls, the floor, the air. The voice sounded older than stars, older than time, older than existence. Simon. His body locked in place. He couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't breathe. The voice continued. I have dreamed for millions of years. The blast door behind him began bending inward. Metal screamed. Massive dents appeared. Something outside was pushing against it. Something unimaginably strong. The ancient voice spoke again. I saw you before you were born. Another dent appeared. The door started tearing apart. Simon backed away. The voice continued. I saw your father. A chill shot through him. His father had died 20 years earlier. The voice continued. I saw his father. The metal door cracked down the center. Darkness poured through the opening. The voice grew louder. I saw humanity's first fire. Simon's mind reeled. The thing had been here before civilization, before history, watching, waiting, dreaming. The final lock exploded. The blast door burst inward. Darkness flooded the room. And within that darkness, something opened its eyes. End of Part 4. The moment the blast door exploded, the darkness rushed into the security room like a living tide. Simon stumbled backward. His flashlight died. The emergency lights died. Even the glowing computer screens went black. There was no light. None. Only darkness, and the feeling that something enormous was staring at him. A low rumble echoed through the room. Not a growl, not a roar. A heartbeat, one colossal heartbeat. Thump. The entire facility shook. Concrete cracked, metal twisted. Miles of tunnels groaned beneath the Nevada desert. Thump. The heartbeat came again. Simon dropped to one knee. The pressure in the air became unbearable. It felt as if reality itself was being crushed. Then two enormous lights appeared in the darkness. Eyes. Not glowing eyes, actual eyes. Each one larger than a house. Watching him, studying him, remembering him. The ancient voice returned. "You are afraid." Simon couldn't speak. The eyes blinked. The simple motion created a gust of wind powerful enough to knock him against the wall. Good. The darkness pulled back slightly, just enough for Simon to glimpse a fraction of the creature. A mistake he would regret forever. Its body seemed made of shifting shadows. Parts of it appeared solid, other parts appeared transparent. Its shape constantly changed. One moment it resembled a giant humanoid, the next it looked like a serpent, then a mountain, then something with thousands of limbs. Human language had no words for it. Human minds had no framework for understanding it. The creature was not merely alien. It was wrong. Fundamentally wrong. As if it belonged to a different universe. Suddenly another roar shook the complex. A familiar roar. The first visitor. Simon turned. The gigantic alien guardian charged through the broken doorway. Behind it came dozens of other pale beings. Some carried strange weapons emitting blue energy. Others wore ancient metallic armor. They surrounded the ancient darkness. The first visitor raised its arms and shouted in its own language. The sound resembled thunder. The other aliens joined in. The air filled with strange symbols made of light. Glowing chains appeared around the darkness. Ancient technology. Ancient power. A final desperate attempt to imprison the thing again. For a moment, it worked. The giant shadows stopped moving. The glowing chains tightened. The facility became still. Hope flickered inside Simon. Then the darkness laughed. A sound so terrible that blood poured from his ears. The chains shattered instantly. Thousands of fragments exploded through the chamber. Several pale aliens were torn apart. The first visitor crashed into a wall. The darkness rose higher, larger, stronger, awake, fully awake. Far above them, the desert began changing. Unknown to the world, Area 51 was becoming the center of a global catastrophe. The night sky above Nevada split open. Massive storms appeared. Satellites malfunctioned. Power grids failed. Airplanes lost communication. Across the planet, people reported the same nightmare. Millions of strangers dreaming of giant black eyes watching them from beneath the earth. Scientists couldn't explain it. Governments couldn't stop it. The awakening had begun. Back underground, Simon fled deeper into the facility. The corridors behind him collapsed one after another. The ancient creature continued rising. Every step it took shattered walls. Every movement distorted reality. Simon eventually reached an old archive chamber. Unlike the military sections, this room looked ancient, far older than Area 51. The walls were covered with carvings, millions of them. The history of the prison, the history of the creature. Simon examined the nearest wall. The carvings told a horrifying story. Long ago, before humanity existed, the ancient darkness traveled from world to world. Not conquering, not invading, consuming. Entire civilizations disappeared wherever it went. Not merely killed, erased. As though they had never existed. Even memories vanished. History vanished. Reality rewrote itself. Worlds became empty, silent, dead. Then Simon found the final carving, the one nearest the center of the room. Unlike the others, it showed Earth, and beside Earth stood a single human figure, a man. The carving looked disturbingly familiar. Simon stepped closer. His heart nearly stopped. The human figure was him. His face, his body, his features. Impossible. The carving appeared millions of years old, yet it depicted Simon perfectly. Beneath it were symbols. He could understand them. The meaning appeared inside his mind. The key. A loud crash interrupted his thoughts. The first visitor stumbled into the archive chamber. The giant alien looked badly injured. Black blood covered its body. Several limbs hung broken. Yet it remained alive. The creature looked at Simon, then at the carving. Its glowing eyes widened. Recognition, understanding, fear. The first visitor slowly knelt before him. Simon froze. The alien guardian lowered its head, like a servant before a king. Then it spoke. "You were chosen." "Chosen for what?" Simon asked. The alien's voice trembled. "To end it." Another earthquake shook the facility. Dust rained from the ceiling. The first visitor pointed toward a distant tunnel. "The heart." Simon frowned. "The creature has a heart?" The alien nodded. "Not a heart of flesh." "Then what is it?" The first visitor looked toward the darkness, toward the ancient being, then spoke the words that changed everything. "It's dream." Simon stared. The alien continued. "It exists because it dreams." The meaning slowly sank in. The ancient creature wasn't alive in the normal sense. Reality itself was trapped inside its dream. Destroy the dream. Destroy the creature. The floor suddenly cracked open. A gigantic shadow rose beneath the archive chamber. The ancient darkness had found them. The first visitor stood. Its body trembled. Its species had spent millions of years guarding this prison. Now their final battle had arrived. The alien looked at Simon one last time, then smiled sadly. Not the horrifying smile Simon had feared. A real smile. A human smile. A farewell. The first visitor turned toward the darkness and charged. The collision shook the underground world. A blinding explosion of light filled the archive chamber. Simon was thrown backward. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was the first visitor disappearing into the ancient darkness, sacrificing itself, buying Simon one final chance, one final opportunity to reach the dream, one final opportunity to save humanity, or watch the world become the next forgotten civilization erased from existence. When Simon opened his eyes again, he was somewhere else. Not in Area 51, not on Earth, not in reality. He stood inside an endless black ocean beneath a sky with no stars. Something was sleeping. Something so large that entire galaxies seemed tiny beside it. The dreamer. The source. The ancient darkness. And somehow Simon knew. The final battle had begun. End of Part 5. Simon stood alone in the endless black ocean. There was no wind, no sound, no horizon, no stars, only darkness stretching forever in every direction. And far ahead, the dreamer slept. Its body was so vast that Simon could not comprehend its size. Galaxies drifted around it like dust particles. Entire nebulae floated across its shadow. Its breathing caused ripples through reality itself. Each breath echoed across eternity. Each exhale created worlds. Each inhale destroyed them. Simon finally understood. The creature beneath Area 51 was only a fragment, a tiny extension, a single finger reaching into reality. The true dreamer existed outside space, outside time, outside existence itself, and Earth had become the place where it would awaken. The black ocean beneath Simon's feet suddenly moved. Shapes began rising from the darkness. Human figures, thousands of them, millions, every victim the dreamer had consumed, every civilization it had erased, every forgotten species, ghosts, shadows, memories. Entire races stood silently in the darkness, watching Simon, waiting. Then among them he saw familiar faces. Walter Briggs, the missing scientists, the soldiers from Hangar 18, even Simon's father. The man smiled sadly, not speaking, simply pointing toward the sleeping giant, toward the dreamer. Simon understood. There was only one way to stop it. He had to enter the dream itself. The moment he took a step forward, reality shattered. Suddenly Simon found himself standing in his childhood home. The smell of old wood filled the air. Sunlight streamed through the windows. Everything looked normal, perfect, safe. His father sat in the living room, alive, healthy, smiling. Tears filled Simon's eyes. For one brief moment, he wanted to stay. To forget Area 51. Forget the nightmare. Forget everything. His father approached, placed a hand on his shoulder, and said quietly, "This isn't real." The house immediately began melting. The walls twisted, the windows darkened. His parents vanished. The dreamer was trying to trap him, trying to keep him asleep forever. Simon forced himself forward. The illusion collapsed. Now he stood inside another dream. A beautiful city. Humanity's future. No wars, no disease, no suffering. Millions of happy people filled the streets. Children laughed. Families smiled. The world was perfect. A voice echoed from the sky. The dreamer's voice. "Stay." Simon kept walking. The city began crumbling. People transformed into shadows. Buildings dissolved into black dust. Another illusion destroyed. Again reality shifted. Again the dreamer attacked. Simon experienced hundreds of lives, hundreds of dreams, infinite temptations, infinite lies, power, wealth, immortality, everything a human could desire. The dreamer offered it all, and every time Simon refused, every step brought him closer to the sleeping giant, closer to the heart of the nightmare, closer to the end. Finally he arrived. The dreamer's core. At the center of the endless darkness floated a single object. A sphere of pure black light. Its impossible surface seemed alive, breathing, pulsing, dreaming. This was the heart, the source of everything, the source of the nightmare, the source of the ancient darkness, the dreamer's dream. Simon approached carefully. The sphere reacted instantly. Thousands of eyes opened across its surface. Each eye stared directly at him. The voice returned. Not angry, not threatening, sad, ancient, lonely. I was alone. Simon froze. The dreamer continued. I dreamed of life. Images filled the darkness, stars being born, worlds forming, civilizations rising. The dreamer had created them all. Not through kindness, not through evil, through loneliness. It dreamed reality into existence because it could not bear eternity alone. Then the voice whispered, I never wanted to wake. For the first time, Simon felt pity. The dreamer wasn't a monster. Not entirely. It was a lonely cosmic being whose dreams had become reality. But now it was awakening. And if it fully awakened, everything would disappear. Humanity, Earth, the universe itself. Everything existed only because the dreamer still slept. And now its dream was ending. The black sphere began cracking. Tiny fractures spread across its surface. The awakening had already started. There was almost no time left. Simon remembered the ancient carvings, the prophecy, the key. He wasn't chosen because he was special. He was chosen because he could make the impossible choice. The choice nobody else could make. Simon stepped forward, placed both hands against the heart. Instantly, unbearable pain exploded through his body. The dreamer's memories flooded into him. Billions of years, infinite loneliness, infinite darkness, infinite dreams. Simon screamed. The sphere cracked further. The dreamer's voice echoed everywhere. Please. The giant being was afraid. Afraid of waking. Afraid of ending. Afraid of being alone again. Tears filled Simon's eyes. But he knew what had to be done. He closed his eyes and whispered, I'm sorry. Then he pushed. The heart shattered. The universe went silent. Every star stopped shining. Every sound vanished. Every thought disappeared. For one impossible moment, nothing existed. Then light exploded across eternity. Brighter than a billion suns, reality trembled. The dreamer released one final breath, one final dream, one final goodbye, and vanished forever. Simon opened his eyes. Morning sunlight warmed his face. He lay in the Nevada desert. Area 51 stood in the distance, silent, empty. The underground facility was gone. No entrance, no prison, no Hangar 18, nothing, as if it had never existed. Rescue teams later found him wandering the desert. His story made headlines. Nobody believed him. Area 51 remained a mystery. Officially, nothing unusual had happened. Officially, Simon had gotten lost. Officially, there were no aliens, no prison, no dreamer, no ancient darkness. Years passed. Simon tried to move on. He wrote books, gave interviews, lived a quiet life. Yet some nights, he woke suddenly at exactly 3:18 a.m. Covered in sweat, heart racing, certain that someone was watching him. One night, decades later, Simon sat alone on his porch, beneath the stars. He was old now, his hair gray, his hands trembling with age. The sky above looked peaceful. Then he noticed something. One star, a single star, blinking strangely, too regularly, too deliberately. Simon stared. The light flashed 3 times, paused, then flashed 3 more, and 3 more. A signal, a message. Simon's blood turned cold, because he recognized the pattern. It was one of the symbols from Hangar 18, the warning, the same warning carved throughout the ancient prison, the same warning that had existed for millions of years. The signal repeated one final time, then the star vanished, and somewhere beyond the darkness between galaxies, something smiled. The end.